Mm, it just does not get any better than a little Bob Dylan. That's the song of the day, folks. Let Me Die in My Footsteps by Bob Dylan. Written sometime in around 1962, I believe. I want to specifically focus on one part of that song before I bring in my guest and get to the topics of the show, because it will be a reoccurring theme in this episode, which is season 1, episode 1 of Minihanedom. You know, I noticed the KMS universe, the Kirk Minahan network, was devoid of any real wrap-up shows. I got my guys at Kirk and Off. They're more guest-based, They do kind of interviews of Minifans. That's not really where I'm going with this one. But quickly, let's reflect on the last stanza of that beautiful piece by Bob Dylan, because it will reappear later in this episode. Go out in the country where the land meets the sun. See the craters and the canyons where the waterfalls run. Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Idaho. Let every state in this union seep deep down in your soul. Thank you. So I'll give you a general layout of the show, but before I do that, I would like to bring on my guest and my guest producer for this episode of the show. We've worked together a lot in the past. You may remember Gathering of the Goats. You may remember me as the executive producer of Menners to Midnight. I've kind of helped guide Mad Menners along in his career, both new and old Menners. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Menners. Please join us.
Dave!
How are you, Menners?
Doing really well. Thanks for having me on Minihandom. You failed to mention Minifandom, the other wrap-up show. Well, it's not really a wrap-up show. Red and I do our own show. It's more a thought experiment, kind of an influencer show. But
You're
thanks
doing
for
a
having me on
show?
Minihandom.
You should release it if you're oh, he's frozen. You're a bit frozen, but if you do a show, you should be putting it out there for the people. Are you releasing them?
Absolutely. I get your notes after every episode.
No. Are they available on the Kirk Minahan network?
Some are, but I've decided to sort of go solo. The network's bad for my brand at the moment, and it's not worth the trouble. So yeah, I'm just cutting my own path now.
Well, I'm happy to hear you. I'm happy to have you here. We'll get more into that later in the show. But just for our listeners, I'll give you a general layout of kind of some of the topics we'll cover. We obviously just had the quote of the day, which will be a reoccurring theme of this show. Also, I will be playing full songs in the intro. And if you 30 seconds skip through them, then I will judge you. We'll talk about this massive ticket controversy we have on our hands. I know you've been on the beat. I've been on the beat doing research. We'll talk a little bit about the KMS tour, the Midwest / Western Southwest tour that seems to be being planned. We'll get to any gripes we have with the show. And then more importantly, we will talk about, is a 12-inch sub considered a light lunch? Because I've seen a lot of banter around that topic. And then we'll end with some recommendations or some recce's,
Awesome.
Before we get to that,
also, VD,
yeah, go ahead.
Listeners submitted questions, so at the end, I think we should answer them. There's a few questions from the listeners. I know your friend Tony Cass has written one. Andy Mayo has asked for a breakdown of said sub, and Ted Sarandis has thrown some curly questions at us. So, yeah, a lot to look forward to for the listeners.
We will not be fielding questions from Ted Sarandis, but we will field the others. Before we get started, I do have a presenting sponsor. Episode 1, season 1, kind of a big deal to sell a show before it even exists. So without further ado, this podcast is brought to you by the Lord Jesus Christ. He's the original sponsor of me, Visionless Dave II. So we're going to both take a moment together. We're going to step inside the Lord. So please repeat after me, Menners. God.
I will not be repeating anything.
This is an ad. You have to do the ad deal. It's just repeat after me.
All right, God, or Santa Claus, yeah.
Grant me the serenity.
Grant me the serenity
To accept the things I cannot change.
To accept the things I cannot change. I remember this from
the
school.
the courage to change the things I can,
The courage to change the things I can,
and the wisdom to know the difference.
and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Great. So let's dive right into it. We have a massive controversy on our hands with this ticket release. There's a lot of angles to it, but before I get into it, I do want to make it clear that I do not want Dave fired, although I think it would be a reasonable response to what's gone on. I don't have malicious intent in my criticisms of him. I'm strictly a journalist in search of the truth. And, I'm a big fan of accountability. I don't think they're not making any more of it, accountability. So we really need to cherish the amount we have. I'll kind of let you take the lead on this. Just give me your general thoughts on it. And is Dave Cullinane, did he really step in it with this?
Well, firstly, I mean, there's no questioning your journalistic credentials, even on the latest Kirk Minahan show. I'm not sure if you still listen during football season, but he said that you're one of the best journalists in America. So, yeah, like Kirk supports your journalistic endeavors. Well, I guess that where to start is, I mean, Dave dumbly admitted live on air, I think on Wednesday's show, that he gave people the link beforehand and he thought he could magically trust these Minifans not to pass it on to all their friends. The dumbest thing I have ever heard.
So I want to focus right on that part right there because obviously it's stupid to trust people with privileged information in this bizarre Twitter universe we are trapped in. But it's not only, I believe on the show he said that tickets were available to them 10 minutes before, like he put it up 10 minutes early and emailed them the link. So he must have told them, the contest winners, in advance, I'll be emailing you a link so you can get the tickets early. Like they're going to go on sale at 10, but I'll email it to you early. So he might have done that days before he sent the link. So these are guys that know, oh, I'm getting the link early. They're gossiping about it. I've seen several screenshots of tickets that were bought at 9:46 a.m., almost 15 minutes before the on sale time. There is such an easier solution to getting those guys into the show. You sell 48 tickets and you have a guest list. It's very simple. Um, so I would like to officially FOIA request the back end of the Barstool ticket sales, because it'll say the exact time every ticket was bought. And I'd like to see how many tickets were bought before 10 o'clock. And I don't think Dave had any malicious intent with this. I'm not convinced he was trying to get his guys the link early. I think it's just purely a moment of idiocy from Dave Cullinane. Your thoughts?
I mean, there's no question about another moment of idiocy from Dave Cullinane, but I also think uh, he probably dropped the link into a couple of his private little group chats just before it went live. I mean, I don't think it's restricted just to those few contest winners. I think obviously he plays favorites, and this is another example. And the thing is, it's just so stupid to admit that. I mean, even if he thinks to himself like, oh, I might not explicitly give the link to these people, but if I give it to enough of the right people, he knew it would get passed on into these group chats. So yeah, I think it's another swing and a miss from Dave.
You know who I feel bad for is, the poor guy who was in his office. Tickets were going on sale at 10. He needed to make sure I don't have a meeting then, I don't have a call then. He might have lied to push something back, or he might have, rushed out of a 9:30 meeting right up before 10 o'clock and thought, I have a few minutes to get to the site and try to get my tickets. And then, by the time he gets there, half of them are gone because there's been this privileged information and this private link that has made it the rounds. And I'm not going to go as far as to assume that he gave it to his guys, although I can't remember where I heard it, but I did hear somebody mention that they got 2 tickets and that Cullinane sent them the link. I don't remember where I heard it, but I definitely heard that somewhere. And so I think, do you think this whole situation would have been treated the same if Steve was in charge? As far as Steve, this never would have happened with Steve. and I would have liked to see Cullinane try to run a raffle like the VFW. But if Steve got caught doing the same thing, the phone lines would be jammed with people saying he should be fired. It would be a huge issue. But maybe for better or for worse, Cullinane he doesn't seem to get that same kind of aggression from the listeners.
Yeah, look, I think, well, firstly, I think the real issue here is as well that, Kirk, he advertises these small exclusive events. He tries to make them so you're desperate to get a ticket. The whole thing about Magnolia was it's going to be a small, limited group of, 50 diehard Minifans that scored a ticket. And the tickets go on sale this time. And then when the tickets go on sale, likely out of the 50 tickets, probably only 15 or 20 were actually there to be bought, if that, maybe less. Maybe by actually 10 o'clock, most of them were gone. So there was no one had a chance. So it's just a real kick in the teeth to Minifans that want to support Kirk. Look, I think there's an element now with Dave where I think the expectations are so low, and the 29K and all these things. I mean, it's pretty clear how inept he is. So I think the fact that he was able to sell tickets is an achievement for someone as mentally backward as he is. So yeah, but you're right. It would have been a controversy with Steve, but I kind of think now Minifans have actually stopped caring because they've been treated so badly so many times. You look at the Benghazi, video at the soccer. You look at all the other instances where things haven't been delivered that were promised. A lot of them Steve issues, Kirk issues, and
California live show
exactly,
guarantee.
the
Yeah.
Minahan guarantee means fuck all. So I think people now just don't give a shit. So, if you set your expectations so low, it's hard to get disappointed. One thing I has sort of been swimming around in my head over the last week is I think I'm actually giving Kirk Minahan a bit of an easy ride lately. And I'm not actually pinning him with enough responsibility for what people under him does. And just you just can't I just can't keep making excuses for Kirk because I like him on air. But the fact is he allows people he employs to treat the fans badly.
You've always said he's a bad leader. I mean, that's nothing new.
He's a
Do you
shocking leader, shocking bots. What I find ironic is he fucking spent his whole time at EI complaining about program direct and the management. Fucking Kirk couldn't run a fucking takeaway store on the corner. He's so disorganized and so inept. I mean, he doesn't ever really make the right decisions. He brings on Harris. You hear him complaining about Harrison not editing interviews in the last few days. Harrison's never edited a fucking interview for any podcast. What do you expect, Kirk? You give Cullinane responsibilities that he can't handle. What do you expect? So I think Kirk at some point's got to shoulder the blame for a lot of these fuck ups.
The Bucks got to stop somewhere. The Bucks got to stop somewhere. Do you think? Because I kind of get a sense of is Cullinane a little comfortable right now? Like he had a kind of early rocky stages where Kirk was kind of on his ass. He was kind of hyper aware of what's going on, and then it's kind of drifted into this place which may be more healthy, but where Dave's not doing a wrap up show and it's no big deal. He can't book guests. I was gonna mention this in my gripes later, but this whole Fred Couples booking saga, I think, is a microcosm of what is wrong with Dave right now. He doesn't have that same hustle or hunger that he once had, where all he needed was, a chance. He needed a foot in the door and he was gonna, get the $5 million deals. And he didn't even know the date of the tournament that he's about to play in. And he even actually said at one point, there's nothing else I can do, which is never the answer. He needs to stop playing by the rules. And if he knows he can't get it done, there's no point in incessantly emailing people because you're instantly just going to turn them off. He needs to let Kirk handle it. He's afraid to ask for help, which is a major problem. And I just, what I really respected about Steve was even a year into the show, and he verbalized this a couple times, he said he always had this anxiety that he missed some sound or that something was going to go wrong. And he really took pride in those little details. And I just think that's a little bit lacking right now. And And as you suggest, maybe that's on it's Kirk's responsibility to hold him accountable. But um, get fiasco has really been bothering me.
Yeah, the way where I am with Dave right at the moment is I feel like a disappointed father. Like I'm not angry anymore at him, and I'm
Right.
not sort of different feelings towards Steve because Steve was a bit of a snake and he actually did things to come after me on a personal and professional level. But that aside, now I'm just at the point with Dave where it's like there's this you just see this sort of dumb little kid running around in circles in the playground, and that's little Dave Cullinane. He runs around in the studio in circles. He doesn't do much. He pretends to be some super great producer with all these ideas, but when you peel them back, there's actually nothing there. And I think now we're enough into him having the job to realize that he was just full of shit. Like he was happy to be on the sideline, working for Jerry and pretending that he was some great producer waiting in the wings to be with Kirk. But since he's taken over, the results have been very disappointing. And we've heard whispers of Kirk wondering, like, where are the interns? Why is there nothing on the network? So I think Kirk feels that. Just a great disappointment. One of the biggest disappointments in my life so far is Dave Cullinane.
We did hear this week on the show, Kirk mentioned he had a kind of a lengthy conversation with Steve, and you could hear a tinge of romanticism in his voice. Let's play hypothetical here. Let's say Steve told Kirk, I want to come back. I want to produce the show. I don't need as much money. I could take less money. I've traveled. I want to settle down. It's only 3 days a week now. It's a lot easier. What happens in that scenario?
Kirk does exactly what he does in these situations. He'd just push Cullinane out. He wouldn't fire him, but he'd make his life miserable like he did
He'd make
to
him
Mike.
quit.
Yeah, he'd make him quit. That's Kirk's
Yeah.
excellent at doing that. So I think that's what he'd do. And look, maybe I don't know. Maybe there was that little inkling from Steve when they spoke, and all of a sudden there was this Fred Couples deadline. Kirk puts that out there. You don't get Fred Couples, you're fired. I mean, maybe that's the first step in just opening the door for a Robinson return.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. We can move along now to kind of this new tour idea that has blossomed and really looks like it grew some roots today with the call regarding Wink, Texas. What are your early
Mm.
thoughts on that? Is it too remote? Is that too remote? Too small of a town?
Just one more thing on Steve and Dave. I don't want
Of
to try
course.
and I don't want to say I'm some like Steve apologist and I want him back, but I guess it's a bit about expectations and the way they're satisfied. I expected a lot from Dave, and he's been so disappointing that if Steve come back, at least I know, okay, the guy's a prick. He's not going to do anything for the network or the Minifans, but at least he'll probably do a good show, and the things like live shows and stuff will be organized much better. So that's where I'm with them. A lot about, I think, if you set, yeah, I just put too much faith in Dave. It's my fault. I should have just
So,
realized Kirk's right. He's a bumbling idiot.
before we even get to Wink, Texas, does Dave have the capability to book what is it grown to a 6 or 7 state tour potentially? Does he have the capability to book that travel, get everything out there? Will his wife even let him leave for a week? Because I kind of got the sense when it was originally brought up, he said, "Oh, maybe I'll bring my family," because I don't think he wants to tell the wife that he's going away for a week and leaving her with the kids. But do you think he has the capability to book that tour?
Yeah, but I think you just have to build in a ratio of fuck up. So 7 shows, okay, probably 5 will only be happening because 2 won't happen due to something on the day. Yeah, so you probably just got to build into it the fuck ups. You probably won't get audio for half the shows. There'll be nothing. Half the shows won't be any good because they'll put no thought into it like they did last summer. So yeah, I think if you just sort of build that into the tour, that would be good. With Dave Cullinane, I actually, really think that I'd like to be the touring producer. I think this would be perfect for Manners to finally help Kirk with something. It's a limited time. Just go on the road with him for a couple of weeks, leave Australia. It's not a long-term commitment. And Dave can stay at home with Kathy and whatever. They can drink piss together and get drunk on the couch, and Kirk and I can have a flawless tour.
I would like to imagine for that kind of tour, he would have to call in the big dogs, call in the real professionals
Mm.
to get it done. But I don't know if you caught this, but did you, when they were talking about how small the Roy Orbison Museum was, Dave had the idea to get another location where they could live stream the show so more people could watch. So his idea was that people would pay $75 for a ticket to go to rural Texas to watch a live stream of the show in a different room, which I thought was very interesting. I'm hyper aware to things that he says that Steve would get killed for, because I just have PTSD for how Roba-fans and Steve Robinson was treated in this universe, and it's kind of baked into me at this point. But do you think Wink, Texas is too remote?
I actually don't know how remote it is. I haven't had a look on a map, but
Oh,
I
it's
like Texas,
remote.
and that's good. I was just actually looking last night. I want to fly into Dallas because you can fly direct Sydney to Dallas. So I could fly into Dallas and from there, uh, hit up the Midwest tour. Me and Kirk drive around doing the shows for a week, and then maybe I fly up to Boston, do a couple of shows in studio, meet some Minna fans, and that's my summer trip.
Suck on some titties.
No comment.
So it started as a Midwest tour, but it sounds to me like it's kind of developing into more of a Southwestern tour with the mentions of Texas, and I think Colorado was mentioned. And this is where we revisit the intro song, the quote of the day. In that song, Bob Dylan suggests that you need to get out to Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and Idaho, which I think would be 4 great locations for live shows. The real America, the frontiers of America, real Americans, real red-blooded American states, really rural, and probably places you really wouldn't go otherwise. Other than Arizona, people go there a good amount. And I guess Vegas is in Nevada, but New Mexico and Idaho, they don't really have anything going on. So I think
I'd
that would
love to
be
do that.
great. He could tack on the Colorado and California live show. He could redeem the Minahan guarantee, get some credibility back, and I don't know. That seems like a good plan to me.
I agree. I think it's a great idea. I would love to do the Midwest tour. He just seems very reticent to go out to California.
What does reticent mean?
Just doesn't seem keen anymore. Like he just doesn't seem like he wants to
Yeah,
do it. It seems like he's over it.
he's dodging it.
Maybe,
He's dodging it.
yeah. We're
I
in
think he has.
California.
Well, that's the
So,
thing.
because he said he
It's.
likes San Diego, and I know
Mm-hmm.
that's not a tiny place, but it's not LA, it's not San Francisco. You can fly straight there. Beautiful hotels for Kirk to stay at. So yeah, I think San
There's
Diego
some
would be a great
real
venue.
there's some real nice, like, rural towns, old school mining towns outside San Diego that I think would be cool. So it's an hour outside of San Diego, maybe 2 hours outside of San Diego, but you know you could still fly in there and stuff. There does seem to be a bit of hesitancy with the California live show. I think maybe there's a degree of shame involved with him knowing that the Minahan guarantee has just gone out the window. So he's maybe burying that rather than addressing it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the issue is.
Either do I, but I'm all in for this sort of August tour of the Midwest, the South, whatever. I think finally, Manners to KMS is going to happen.
God willing.
Thanks. Hopefully, Santa Claus will help.
Hey, whatever your higher power is, that's your choice, brother. So what is the current status of your relationship with double A TNM?
At a theatre near me, it's really good. I'm not listening anymore. I listened to the Tim Ridgels episode because I liked him, and I like I like it was Tim and Chris, so that was fine. None of it goes in. None of it's that interesting. I sort of just gave up because I'm a bit like Dave. I'm just like Chris. He's a bit like Kirk. It's not so bad you can shit on it anymore. It's just kind of like this average thing, and it's so disappointing that Chris's imagination is so limited to just him in a room reflecting on going to the movies. I know people think I'm a know-it-all or whatever, but I just think you saw in my one little taste where you do it live on the spot how much more he could get out of that show. And it frustrates me as a podcast producer. I just think you should be doing better. So I've stopped listening because I like Chris and I don't want to hate him.
That's probably a healthy decision for you. I'm not a movie guy, so I'd never listen to it, but I do like Chris, and I have given him. I think I'm a victim of ageism because I've given him quite a few good ideas, especially, he was in my hometown where I grew up for 20 years. And, I'm telling him, oh, go to this theater, not that one. Oh, there's a famous chili dog place here. You can go there. The train stops right here. And he's kind of just disregarded me. So I think I'm a victim of ageism. And I think that's just a fundamental foundational problem of the project is it's a little bit too much about him. The podcast shouldn't be about him. He should just do what we want him to.
Yeah, it's just boring. I mean, that's the problem for me. It's just boring. Like it's just like him talking about candies and going to the movies. And I liked Tim because I like Tim, but yeah, I don't miss it. And I mean, I'm glad it's doing well. I'm glad a lot of jokes are being made about it and stuff. But Chris is kidding himself. He thinks Big Cat's actually listening to any of the episodes anymore. I mean, he hears Kirk talking about concessions month, and that's why he talks about it. I mean, he says the listens are going up, but that can't be right.
In 6 weeks' time, is AATNM even getting mentioned on the main show, or is it just a thing of the past?
I think it'll be a thing of the past, and I wouldn't be surprised if Chris is a thing of the past on the show. You can just see slowly Kirk starting to get annoyed at him, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few changes in the next couple of months.
Okay. Do you think there's something he could do to kind of give himself a more permanent status? Does he need a new shtick instead of bringing a game? Does he need some new little bit or thing he can bring to the show? Is the game run its course?
I think the game has certainly run its course. I think maybe Kirk's got all he can out of Chris now. Maybe sort of the well's empty, a bit like it was with Carabas after 2 episodes. It's taken Chris a lot longer to get there, but maybe it's just run a bit dry, especially now that Quantum Week's gone and Carano's gone. There's not that sort of other drama that Kirk can play to.
We ultimately know that Kirk's goal with bringing Chris on the show was to slowly strangle the life out of Quantum Week and ruin Chris and Carano's relationship, and he's accomplished that. So now it's like, the cat with the dead rat, just whacking it, wishing it was still alive. There's no life left in that. So I like Chris on the show. I think he does okay, but I always love new voices on the show. I'm not saying he should be off forever. I like hearing from him, and him and Kirk, even some of the stuff they talk about isn't. I'm not a movie guy. I'm not a baseball guy. So that's not even in my wheelhouse, but he's a decent listen. I'll give him a decent listen.
Oh yeah, the shows have been fine. Yeah. What about just sort of just off topic, but what do you think of Kirk taking Harry to the latest Jackass movie?
Oh, I think that's a great move. Great move.
I agree, because he'll never forget that.
Those are core memories. It's important to build core memories in life, and any of them that you can build with any other person, let alone your child. That's a good core memory. You got to be the cool dad.
I remember my grandfather took me to this sort of pseudo-erotic French film called Manon des Sources, and had this, beautiful French girl with her titties out and everything. And I was like this, just hitting puberty, and never forgot that. It was a real bonding experience between me and my grandfather ogling these tits together. So anyway, Kirk and Harry got to look at all the penises together. Yeah.
That's what it's all about. All right, I guess we can move, unless you have anything more on Chris, we can move on to gripes.
No, let's go on to gripes.
Okay, gripes. See, what are my gripes? I mean, you mentioned this in the listener questions, so we can kind of combine this section, but I want to weigh in on the debate. Is a 12-inch sub a light lunch? Now, I'm going to give you a chance to make your case before I actually make a ruling. So go ahead, plead your case.
Well, I'll tell you what was on the sub. So it was a foot long turkey on a malted rye, toasted, no cheese, with lettuce, capsicum, onion, carrots, honey mustard dressing, salt and pepper. So I think that's on the lighter side. I honestly didn't eat the whole foot long sub. I had sort of about. See, my gripe with Subway is the 6 inch is not quite enough, and the foot long's a bit too much. What you need sort of in between. So yeah, I
An
sort
8
of ate.
inch.
Yeah, an
Eight
8 inch. Yeah,
an 8
same as
inch.
my
8
coffee.
inches
So
is the perfect size. Yeah.
that's what the minimum lady
Carrots on
said.
a sandwich. I've never British people eat some pretty weird food. I don't even think they put carrots on a sandwich.
Yep, carrots, shredded carrots on an Aussie sandwich is popular. So yeah, what do you think? Do you think that's a light lunch or not?
I don't think it's a heavy lunch, but it's also not a light lunch. If you say you didn't finish it, I maybe lean towards lighter, but that's not really the argument here. I think what a lot of people get confused with is if you go to your local mom and pop shop, a 12-inch sub is going to be stuffed. It's going to be, this big around. This is Subway, they kind of skimp you. So yeah, I would say it's not a light lunch, but it's not a heavy lunch, but you definitely are incorrect in saying it's a light lunch.
Okay, lightish, lightish.
Let me get to my gripe and then we can dive into the rest of the questions. There was some serious Mike Florio slander on the show this week, which I know you probably don't even know who that is, but I take that very personally. I'm a big Florio guy. I listen to usually both his shows 5 days a week. He's got multiple podcasts. He is a nerd and a dork, but that's what makes him likable. He's self-deprecating. He's self-aware. He is a total clown and does things, but that's his charm. Kind of like I can't really put it into words, but there was some serious Florio slander, and he's actually a good journalist. He's an inspiration for my journalism. He doesn't carry water for the NFL like a lot of these other hacks do. He asks hard questions, so I actually would like an apology for that from Kirk if he can find it in his heart.
You're right. I don't know him. But I remember when he did open he did the morning show before while they were all off, and the stink about that when he was at EEI. What about then the way Kirk sort of subtly tried to cancel Howard Stern, or not cancel, but he really tried to get some of the stuff that Stern's done out there. It's an interesting kind of relationship, you know. Stern was Kirk's hero. Now it's sort of the wheels kind of turned, and I think Kirk probably doesn't respect Stern as much. And then he tries to cancel him. I mean, Kirk would not say I'm trying to cancel Stern, but he was hoping at least something he put up there on the show or in his Twitter got traction, but it didn't.
I hear your point. I mean, that clip was all over Twitter, so I think he was just kind of doing it to prove a point, but I got no problem with it really. Kirk obviously has a very emotional attachment to Howard Stern. He grew up with him. Um, there is, many years of connection there. When someone you really like that turns on you, it can be tough. And luckily, been able to stick his head in the sand and ignore how obnoxious and insufferable Bruce Springsteen has become. Because if he lost Howard and Bruce, I don't know what would happen.
Yeah, well, he's lost The Sopranos, so he could lose anybody at this point.
Yeah.
Well, what about that congressman? Sorry, just going back to Steve,
Oh,
Mark Judson.
yeah.
I especially towards the end of the call when Judson was just throwing out these wild statements, I was like, I so wished Steve had been there because
Oh,
those two were like polar, like they're very similar, Judson and Steve, but on the opposite side of the fence. Like those two, if you put them in a debate, it would go on for hours.
Oh, Steve would just belittle him. He would be laughing at him. You can't compare them. Steve is actually smart. That guy is just like he's got a couple screws loose. They are polar opposites in their views, but I mean that guy couldn't even really explain his views. He reminded me of what was his name, Jonathan Soroff. You know, every now and then you get one of these guests that comes out of nowhere, and it's just like a hurricane, and we'll probably never hear from him again, but you know, in a couple months, someone will say, "Oh, remember Mark Judson?" It'll be like, "Oh shit, yeah, I'm gonna go back and listen to that episode." But yeah, he was totally crazy. A really enjoyable listen. I think your tweet was perfect. Um, I think you're a Robba fan.
No, I just respect Steve's production abilities now that I've actually seen what Cullinane can do. And one more question I've got for you is, so there's a sort of a graph that whenever Kirk does a live performance, then he needs some time off afterwards. So he does 7 shows in 7 days. Does that mean he needs after that? A week for every show mental time. So it's like we get 7 shows, but then we're going to have Kirk away for 2 months or 7 months. You know, is there a concern there? I mean, I'm concerned as a fan. He'll crash. It'll be McLean's all over again or whatever. And we get those 7 shows, but then we don't get him for a long time.
Well, I mean, if Dave keeps messing up the tickets and everything, who knows if he'll even make it through a 7-day show? He
Mm.
might be, God forbid, but that could go really wrong. There does seem to be some correlation between the live events but you never really know. I mean, he does so many live events that I don't know if it's directly correlated or if it's a coincidence. But I do think a 7-show tour could be pretty taxing on some relationships. You know, you're kind of bumping elbows with everybody pretty often. I would be more worried that he will hate the fans by the end of it than hate the show.
He'll love me by the end of it. A week of Kirk and I working together on the open road. You can imagine like the roof's down on his Mercedes. The hair, the wind sort of flowing through our bald heads.
You guys
Me
could
and
get
Kirk
you
shooting
could
the
get
shit about
matching
podcasting.
you could get matching tattoos,
Mm.
so
Yeah,
you'd always
like
remember that trip.
yeah, and I'll do like pro bono consultation on leadership podcasting and producing true crime podcasts, and he can
And
in the yeah.
setting up a microphone for remote
Absolutely.
shows.
I
You could
mean,
teach
that'll
them
be the
that.
first thing. It's really hard to plug in a USB mic. It's really on the producers for not pushing that agenda. And then, he can, on the other hand, I mean, Kirk's insane ability on air. I'm sure he can give me some tips. I know he's a big Mena fan and he listens to a lot of shows. So I know he could give me a lot of tips. I'll never forget actually early on when I started doing the Aussie Minifan show, he said, it'd be good if Manners just talked a bit more, like he was a bit more natural. And so I've
Hmm.
taken that on board. I don't know if I've been able to deliver it, but try to use his advice, and I'd be happy for him to give me more advice because I've got lots of advice for him.
Yeah, I mean, your Kirk impression has gotten pretty good these days. I do imagine the trip would be a time where you guys could kind of just talent swap and kind of just evolve and grow together. And, maybe one day when he's writing his book, he has a chapter where he's like, that week with Menners, really gave me some new perspective on life. It really changed things for me. And my career would have never been the same without it.
Yeah, like the cover page on his book, the autobiography. Just preface this by thanking Manners for everything he's done for me.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
simple like that.
Something simple. Yeah. Maybe
I know,
like,
and I know he loves small talk, so us just shooting the shit and getting to
yeah,
know each other and stuff would be a lot of fun.
it'd be great. Moving on to another gripe here. I'm not one for Jerry Callahan podcast talk, but when I was on Twitter yesterday and I saw a clip of Michael Montante on Jerry Callahan show, I I could not process what I was seeing, let alone knowing that he was in the role auditioning as a producer when he does not even produce his own podcast. John from Scranton produces it. He doesn't know how to add sound. He doesn't know how to edit audio. He can't upload it. He barely gets his podcast off the ground. I had to convince him to get a microphone. He was just doing it talking into his speakerphone. He holds up a Bluetooth speaker to the microphone to play clips. I mean, this has it gotten to the point where Jerry just needs to retire? Because I was looking at his Twitter handle the other day and there was clips tweeted out and it's got 2 likes, and I'm just like, if you've had such a great career, I'm sure he has plenty of money. He's got a couple houses. Like, what makes him want to keep doing that? Because it's almost getting to the point where someone needs to sit him down and just say, this is getting really sad if you have Michael Montante auditioning for your show.
I mean, I agree. Firstly, probably Catholic guilt is what keeps him going. And then sort of working back, I was surprised as you when I saw Montante on there. Yeah, I echo what you think. I mean, he's not a producer. He, babbles shit into a microphone. I will admit, I think like Montante is entertaining when he's talking about KMS. Like, I don't care about his other stuff. So I'll listen to bits of him with KMS people, and that's about it. I don't think he's a boring bloke, but you're right. He's not a producer. He's got no skills. And I said to Montante, I actually sent him a message that, if you get this job, then you have to delete Montante as well, because, I mean, you've said about 50 racist things on that podcast. For one, I mean, then there's the pedophile stuff and all. Like, if it's taken out of context, you'll be cancelled within a week. So just delete the whole show. So that was my advice to him. I loved it when Jerry made fun of Montante by saying that he's fat and overweight and high risk, so he should be getting the vaccine. That was a great Jerry moment. So I like that. Look, between you and me and all the listeners and viewers, in the last 24 hours, I've actually reached out to the Jerry Callahan podcast Twitter and said, if you really are stuck for someone to produce, I mean, there's no difference me being in Sydney as there is Carano being in New Hampshire or wherever he lives, or Montante being in New Jersey. So it doesn't matter, actually. The difference doesn't make a difference. Like, so I've said to the Jerry I can help. I don't want to do it permanently, but if he needs help at the moment, I could certainly do it. Just work out the time difference.
That's very philanthropic of you. I just don't know. I think it might be time to take Jerry out behind the barn and just shoot him, racehorse style.
Theory that I think he should actually move his show to just a once a week podcast. I think what he's asking for at the moment is too much. I think if we could get a nice tight show for Jerry, maybe say an hour to an hour and a half, where we get sort of half an hour of him babbling on, getting his opinions out there, maybe a feature interview where he gets a guest on to either argue with or, on an issue of the week, and then maybe end with sort of listener questions or something. That would be a great sort of hour and a half show for Jerry, and it would take the pressure out for him. At the moment, it feels like he's can't get a producer who's trying to do all these shows and no one's listening. I'm telling you, no one's listening. I reckon they're getting under a few thousand listeners per episode.
Yeah, I mean, didn't he used to be a writer for a really long time? Why doesn't he just write a book? He can write a right-wing book, sell a couple thousand copies, and that'll take up a few years. By the time that's done, who knows?
He was a columnist for Sports Illustrated. That's where he made his name, and I can imagine that was just the best job, the height of Sports Illustrated. But before the internet, traveling around the country doing features, would have just been an incredible job. And you're right, when he talks about that stuff, he's got amazing stories. He could write 10 books on it.
Maybe we have the ultimate redemption arc, and he hires Steve Robinson to write his book.
They hate each other though now.
Yeah. Hey, money talks. Do you have any gripes? I have no more gripes. Is there any more questions? We will not be fielding a Ted Sarandis question, but is there anything else? You said Tony Cass, I believe, who I believe will be my guest.
What's the hate towards Ted? Just curious.
I just don't like Ted. I get a bad vibe from him. I think I know who's behind the account, and I'm not a fan of that person. And even if it's not that person, I'm just not a fan of Ted. So,
Alrighty, so
no
next
Ted.
question,
Yeah,
Victor. Why is Dave more hateable than Steve? Is it only because he's lazy? Well, you go. Why is Dave more hateable?
I would say, I can't answer this question because to me, Steve wasn't really hateable, but Dave is definitely less hateable. Even as a Rabba fan, I admit that Dave is, like we explained earlier in this show, it's kind of everyone's just a little disappointed because their expectations for him were higher than his own expectations are for himself, which is a bad situation to get in. But I really don't hate Dave. Even this massive ticket scandal that is like borders on being worse than 9/11, or it's definitely worse than Benghazi. Just it's kind of like Enron financial scam, something terrible. But yeah, I can't hate Dave. I think that's his greatest quality is he's kind of unhateable. I can get mad at him, but I can't hate him.
Yeah, it's like if you, I said before, but take it one step further. You go to a park and there's a little disabled kid in the corner, and that's sort of how I look at Dave. It's impossible to hate someone like that. He's just mentally challenged, and
Hmm.
yeah, I feel sorry for him. He's probably got wet brain from his mum, who was an alcoholic, probably when she was pregnant with him. So he's
Yeah.
starting off behind the eight ball anyway. So you hard to hate him. Laura's sundress. Why are you such a grumpy, foul person? That's to me. No one cares about VD. He brings nothing to your spectacular show like that Reddit guy does. So why have the turd on? Laura's sundress. Just to clarify, I mean this is Minihanedom, so this is a totally different
Hmm.
show. So, and why am I such a grumpy, foul person? I'm not sure why. Yeah, I can't answer that at all. Tony Cass, why is Menace such a joyless turd? Also, why does he hate me so much? I guess this feeds on to the last question. I guess I'm grumpy because I'm passionate about the show. I love Kirk. I love the show. And, so many things about it drive me nuts. Um, Tony, I don't really hate you. I just think you're annoying. And I would prefer never to talk to you again on a KMS network show.
Tony Cass, who I believe will be my guest next week for episode 2, one of my favorite Minifans. I would say you could that tweet kind of describes Tony, and it describes exactly what I like about Tony. I think he's kind of a snarky asshole, miserable turd, but that's what I love about him. He's the number one reply guy in KMS Twitter.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all my questions from the listeners. Andy Mayo, I've done the breakdown of my turkey sub. Love to hear your feedback on that one, Mayo. I went for the honey mustard, no offense, but just a bit less calories in the honey mustard.
I have a feeling he might have an issue with the carrots on the sandwich, but we'll see. All right,
Little quirk.
before we get to Reckies, I'd just like to do a shout out. Hopefully you prepared a shout out as well. I'd like to shout out Addy Ray Simp on Twitter, aka Pedro Neto Stan, who traveled all the way from New York to freezing cold Wolverhampton, England, to watch the Wolves crushing defeat to Arsenal, but he made the journey. He made the pilgrimage. I don't even know how he's a Wolves fan or who he is or how I know him on Twitter, but there's some KMS connection. So I'd just like to give him a shout out. I'd also like to shout out Bob Dylan for providing our intro music and our quote of the day. Menners, any shout outs?
He'd just like to shout out Kirk Cameron. Huge fan of his growing up. Love the references in the latest show. So shout out to Kirk Cameron.
Big shout out to Kirk Cameron. Okay, Reckies. I just watched a film. Not a big movie guy. I've probably seen less than 20
I've
movies
got
in
some
my
too.
life. I just watched a film called Old Henry, written and directed by Pazzi Ponciroli, an Italian fellow, starring Timmy Blake Nelson, Scotty Hayes, and Gavin Lewis. And it was phenomenal. I cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, I'll
Have
give a
you have
recce
you heard of
for
it?
no. My recce is After Party, the new show on Apple TV Plus, set in your hometown of LA. Be loving that. I think it's 4 or 5 episodes in. So yeah, I'd recommend After Party.
I'll have to check that out. And then my last recce, available on Netflix, a documentary called Last Breath. I watched it last night. I almost had to stand for the second half of it. It made me so uncomfortable. It's about a deep sea commercial diver um, working on like gas equipment at the bottom of the ocean, like 300 feet deep, and things don't go as planned. And it is all real footage, and it is terrifying. But yeah, that's
Oh wow,
available
okay, I'll look out for that one.
oh, it's good. It's available on Netflix, at least in the US right now. Menners, I'd like to thank you for joining the show. I'd like to thank you for being guest producer. Um, any last words for the people?
No, thanks for having me, VD. Always fun to chat. You and I have a complex relationship, but yeah, people want to hear your takes on the KMS world. So I'm glad you invited me on, and we could get this out there.
Yeah, I'm glad that my sister didn't kill my dog while she was high driving a snowblower and I didn't have to cancel. So I'm always here on time. I'm here when you need me. Um, I like to get the ball in my hands and I like to run with it. Without any further ado, I say goodbye.